Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com. Today, I'm taking your questions on TSIs versus FSIs, diesel timing belts, why I decided to be a Volkswagen technician, and more. This is episode 119 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, so today is a show where I take your questions. To get a question on a show like this, email me, charles@humblemechanic.com, and be sure to put question for Charles in the subject. That's what I use to filter out your emails. It also helps prevent your emails getting shot into the spam folder. Also, if you don't hear your question on the show, email it to me again. Sometimes, like I said, things get lost in the spam folder, and I want to make sure to get all your questions answered. All right, before we get into the show, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts. Everything from gaskets and fluids to suspension parts and air conditioning parts. They also make the OEM DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi, so check them out at crpautomotive.com. All right, with that, let's get into your questions. First one comes from Peter. Why the heck did you decide to become a Volkswagen technician? I've had to work on a few VWs over the last few weeks at work, and it was the most miserable experience of my wrenching life. I did a clock spring, an actuator, and a thermostat on an '08 Jetta. I can't imagine working on Volkswagens all day, so why did you pick it? Peter, that's a great question. The very simple answer is when I was at tech school, they had a manufacturer's program for a lot of different manufacturers. BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, Volkswagen. I think Nissan had just signed up. There may have been a few other ones. I don't really remember, to be honest. And initially, the reason that I picked Volkswagen is purely because they had the most cars on the road at that time. I wasn't quite the Volkswagen enthusiast that I am today. I did have experience with Volkswagen, but it was extremely limited. So I sort of fell into it. And as far as working on Volkswagens versus other brands, all brands can have their bad points. You know, I know how to work on Volkswagens, and I know a ton of people hate working on Volkswagens. I think if I went to a different brand, I would probably struggle for a little while until I picked up the way they do things and how they set up their repair manual, how the special tools work with other brands. So it's all kind of in what you know. Now that's so ingrained in my brain that, like I said, I would really struggle going to another brand, at least for a little while. For those of you that are thinking about going to a European car manufacturer to work on the cars, don't let others' opinions sort of dissuade you from it. Yeah, they can be much harder cars to work on, but eventually you'll get to the point where you know how to work on it, and being a good European car technician is an incredibly valuable position to be in. So I love it, and I think a lot of other people do too. All right, next one comes from Darwin. Hey Charles, I'm looking for a GTI. I've done a bit of research on the Mark V GTI, and it has both the TSI and the FSI engines. The TSI engine is the timing chain driven 2-liter direct injection engine, and the FSI is the one with the timing belt. That's the easiest way to distinguish between the two. I believe the switch was made in late 2008. The price difference for early and late Mark V is pretty large, even with everything else being the same. Is it worth paying more for the TSI? I'm a college student, so I can pay the initial cost of the car, but if repair costs start mounting, it might prove difficult, so reliability is a top priority, not performance. Thanks again for your videos and taking the time to read this. You know, that's a really great question. I don't know if the TSI is better than the FSI. They both have their pros and they both have their cons. The FSI is going to be a little bit more maintenance-heavy engine. Remember, it does have a timing belt, and that belt's going to need to be serviced at some point. But again, they both have their pros, they both have their cons. Let's leave the pros sort of out for now, because the cons are really the ones that are going to cost you money. Some of the cons of the FSI are, it needs a timing belt at some point. The high-pressure fuel pumps wear the camshafts, wear the followers, and that gets pretty expensive. Thermostat failure is pretty common on those engines. Catalytic converters are pretty common on those engines. Ignition coil failures on those engines are pretty common. Failing cooling fans are pretty common on those engines. So you see, there's a lot of little knick-knacky things that go wrong with them, and there's a lot of things that are pretty expensive to go wrong with them. But for the TSI, we also have a couple of things we want to be concerned about. Leaking water pumps is a really common issue. Timing chain failure is a common issue. There is no service interval technically for the timing chains, so no one ever does any maintenance on them. And then in turn, you know, if the tensioner fails, the entire engine has damage, which is also the same with the FSI. If you don't put a timing belt on it and the belt breaks, you're talking basically the same damage. Being that we're talking 2008, it definitely has the oldest variant of the timing chain tensioner, so I'd be really concerned about that. And the cost of doing a timing chain tensioner and doing a timing belt isn't that different. We also have high pressure fuel pump failures on the TSI. We also have carbon buildup on the TSI, which was much more of an issue on the TSI than it really ever was on the FSI. So there's kind of the same problems, just built a little bit differently into these two engines. You know, I don't know if I would pick one or the other. My initial thought is, yeah, go with the TSI, because then you don't ever have to put a timing belt on it. But if you immediately have to put a timing chain tensioner on it anyway, you know, that sort of equalizes the two. Man, this is a tough call. It's gonna really come down car to car on what you are looking for. If you find a GTI that's the perfect GTI and it has an FSI, I would get it. If you find a GTI that's perfect and has a TSI engine, I would probably get that one. As always, make sure you're taking either one of these vehicles, whatever vehicle you get, before you buy it, please, one more time, before you buy it, take it to get it inspected. Have them look at the warranty history of the vehicle. That's one great thing about taking it to the dealership that a lot of independents can't look up, is we can look up warranty history. Have them go through the car, top to bottom, front to back, and make sure the overall vehicle is a good quality vehicle. You want to focus really heavy on maintenance as well. You want to make sure that the car's been maintained properly over its life. And again, both of them have pros, both of them have cons. It's going to be more about finding the right car for you and not necessarily focusing on one engine or the other. So great question, Darwin. Good luck. And hey, if you find a GTI, make sure you post a picture of it on the Facebook page. All right, next one comes from David. I'm looking to purchase a 2012 Jetta Sportwagon TDI with a manual transmission. This vehicle has 110,000 miles on it. Should I have any concerns with the mileage on it? Carfax is clean and shows regular maintenance. I know a lot of issues have come up with high-pressure fuel pumps for the TDI. I've really fallen in love with the looks of the car, and it would be a great functioning car for my family, 2 kids and a dog. Please let me know what you think about buying used VWs, especially TDIs. David, great question. Going back to the last question, the first thing I always recommend, make sure you take it and get it inspected. Doesn't matter how great it looks on the outside. Sometimes, you know, the mechanical problems, or there may be underlying problems underneath the vehicle that you don't just see on first glance. And remember, Carfax doesn't report everything. There could be things wrong with it that are not reported on a Carfax report. So please take it in and get it inspected. It's going to be the best $100, $200, whatever it costs, that you could ever spend on a vehicle. At 110,000 miles, here's what you need to be worried about. Timing belt, it's coming soon, 20,000 miles or so. DPFs are technically due to be replaced at 125,000 miles, so I would be concerned about that. Being a 2012, it probably never got one early in its life. Make sure when you take it in, they pull the warranty history and see if the diesel particulate filter has been replaced. Right now, the other really common thing has been failing intake manifold runners. You can replace the entire intake manifold. It's like a $900 job, or you can buy the Diesel Geek repair kit for like 80 bucks or whatever it costs today. I'll put a link down in the video notes. It's an awesome little kit. I did a review on it. I highly recommend it. It's an incredible alternative to paying big bucks to have the entire intake manifold replaced. As far as failures of the high pressure fuel pump, that's not nearly the issue today as it was a few years ago. They still do fail. Some of these Volkswagen Jettas have a warranty extension on the high pressure fuel pump. You want to have them check and see if your vehicle qualifies under that warranty extension. There was some criteria about making sure that the misfueling guard was installed inside the gas tank nozzle. So check that, make sure that's installed. Other than that, these diesels have been pretty good. Of course, there are failures. There's failures beyond, you know, the high pressure fuel pump and the timing belt and DPFs. We put a fair amount of glow plug or pressure sensors in the vehicles. The exhaust pressure sensors, we put in a fair amount. Other than that, though, those are like the really, really high points. These cars have been pretty good for us. Just, I can't say it enough. Please make sure you take that car in and get it inspected. All right, next comes from Jeff. Hello, Charles. I have a Mark 6 GTI, and Volkswagen recommends to have the spark plugs changed at 60,000 miles. Folks on various forums state to change the plug at 40,000 miles and also recommend changing the coil packs at this time as well. Many upgrade to the R8 red top coil packs. My question is, why do spark plugs need to be changed so frequently on this car? And are there any real benefits to the red top coil packs? I've had the red top question before. A lot of folks swear by it. I'll try and find the show that I answered that same question because the response in the comments was really good. That's where you want to focus when it comes to that show. I've personally never put them on a car, but enough people have done it and they're seeing a performance gain, allegedly. So, you know, it doesn't hurt. The coil packs aren't that expensive. And if it makes a little bit of difference in performance or it makes you feel better about the performance, then I say go for it. As far as spark plugs, yes, 60,000 miles is the service interval. Generally, the plugs on the 2 liters don't look that bad at 60,000 miles. But one thing you want to do look at 60,000 miles is what do the intake valves look like? because a lot of times what we'll do is we'll do an intake cleaning in that range, 60 to 80,000 miles. We'll take the injectors out, we'll clean the injectors, we'll put new seals on them, and usually we go ahead and put a new set of spark plugs in it as well to sort of give it the overall tune-up, what the traditional tune-up used to be effect, and it seems to do great. As far as putting them in at 40,000 miles on the 2-liter turbo, unless one was bad, I don't think I would. Or if I had some kind of drivability problem, I may go that route first because it is one of the least expensive things to do. Now, if this were a 2-liter non-turbo, I would tell you you're probably looking at putting spark plugs in it at 30,000 miles. For whatever reason, that latest generation of 2-liter non-turbo eats spark plugs, and it's incredibly sensitive to fuel quality. I've had spark plugs need to be replaced 15,000 miles after we put them in because they'll cause like a load-based misfire or something like that, check engine light, and spark plugs take care of it. So on your TSI, I wouldn't necessarily worry 100% about doing them at 40. I would probably do them at 60 because that's the maintenance interval. Should they last longer? Maybe. It's another one of those things. Do oil filters last more than 10,000 miles? Probably. Is it worth running the risk on an oil filter? Absolutely not. On spark plugs, maybe, but remember, let's say you wait until one fails. Unless you have the proper diagnostic equipment or the skill to diagnose a misfire, you're probably going to have to take that car in and get it checked out, get the check engine light diagnosed, and that's going to just cost you more money. And then it's going to cost you money for a shop to say, hey, your check engine light's on because your spark plugs are bad, when you can clearly just go ahead and replace them. It's a super easy DIY. Just make sure you torque down the spark plugs. All right, this one comes from Steven. My question this time is if the DSG fluid in the Tiguan is serviceable or it is a permanently sealed unit. Watch your video with Deutsche Auto Parts and trying to familiarize myself with everything to do for the job. I noticed there's no DSG filter housing where the GTI is located, and I cannot locate it anywhere else. Also, the bolt on the bottom of the DSG pan is quite different. I've heard about some models having a sealed system, but I can't find anywhere that said if the Tiguan was as well. Stephen, this is an awesome and incredibly easy question. You have two parts here. One, the Tiguan doesn't have a DSG in the US, so you're not going to find the filter up on top like the DSG cars. This has a regular automatic transmission, and the great thing about the Tiguan, it does not have a service interval. Now, would I hate on anybody for servicing this transmission at 50,000 miles? Absolutely not. If we were going to buy our leased Tiguan out, I would service the transmission. But technically, there is no service interval, so technically, you don't really need to worry about it. I'm not sure what's different about this Tiguan transmission versus, say, the Jetta transmission that eliminates the need for a fluid exchange, but that's what's in the book. So that's sort of at the dealership what we go by. But again, I wouldn't be hating on anybody for doing that transmission service. The filter on this transmission is actually up above the transmission pan, so you'd have to take the transmission pan down, change the filter out, put a new filter, fill it back up with fluid. That little small plug with the 5mm hole in it is the drain and the fill plug for that transmission. It's a really easy transmission to service. It does get filled very similar to the way the DSG does through the bottom. But again, not having a service interval, Stephen, it's really up to you on whether or not you want to do it. So I guess in the meantime, I wouldn't really worry too much about it. Next one comes from Jeremiah. Recently bought a 97 Jetta GLX with the VR6, and I've been going over and learning more about it and came across that it has a secondary water pump or auxiliary pump, and mine has been deleted. Is this a significant part or all right to be deleted? Since finding your podcasts have been very enlightening to me, thanks for any help. All right, Jeremiah, the secondary coolant pump is an electric coolant pump that will circulate coolant through the system generally when you turn off the car. So gut says I wouldn't want it deleted. I would want it installed. I would want it functioning properly because I want anything to help keep my VR6 cool that I can possibly have. About the only reason I think someone would delete that is because the pump quit working or the pump had a blockage in it and they decided that they could just cut it out and join the pipes together or whatever. So I would try and find a way to get it fixed. If you need to buy a new secondary coolant pump, go ahead and get the pump. You may need to buy new hoses depending on what kind of hack job that was done to delete the Afterrun coolant pump. So great question. Congrats on the new VR6, and stay tuned, man. I got some great VR6 stuff coming in the next few months. All right, next one comes from Bruce. My question is, I have two 2009 Jetta TDIs. Both have between 68 and 70,000 miles. My VW dealership is recommending changing the timing belts. The procedure here is about $1,400 and includes water pumps and pulleys and all that good stuff. I understand this is a very labor-intensive job, hence the high cost. Now, VW Maintenance Book recommends it at a slightly higher mileage point, so I'm wondering what your thoughts are for our 6-year-old TDI engines. Is time a notable factor, or climate it is driven in, or how many miles? And yes, here in Alberta in mid-December now, we have several inches of snow just in time for a white Christmas. Remember, this is my opinion. Time does play a factor on a timing belt interval. When the timing belt intervals were right at 100,000 miles, I like to do them at 5 to 6 years. Remember that the timing belt is always tensioned, so whether it's driven or whether it's not, there's always stress on the belt. Now, is the stress on a belt while the car is parked as much as while it's driving? Probably not, but there is still that tension on the belt. In addition, there's that pressure on the rollers as well, on the bearings of the water pump. So yes, I think time does play a factor. Now, 6 years on a service interval that's 120 or 130,000 miles, I think that's a little bit soon. I usually do these in the 7 to 8 year range. I think that makes a little more sense to me, but it all really depends. It all really depends on what the condition of the timing belt is. If they pull the cover off and look at it and you can start to see the timing belt cracking, put a timing belt on it. If they pull the cover and it looks just like a brand new one does, minus maybe some discoloration, I would go ahead and wait. Bruce, my thing with timing belts has always been this. It's better to do a timing belt 10,000 miles too early or a year too early than 1 mile too late. So it's one of those things that if it were my car, I would probably wait a little while. I'd probably wait till about the 7-year mark, unless I saw a reason, a specific reason, like damage to the belt, a damaged roller, a leaking water pump, to do it really any earlier than that. So great question, man. I hope that helps. I'm not really hating on the dealership that recommended it at 5 or 6 years. I just think personally that's a little bit too early. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, please post it in the comments section below. Hey, if you liked the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, obviously right here on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. I got a coffee over there. No beer of the day because it's super early on Sunday. It's like 7 o'clock Sunday morning, so it's a little cold, and no beer.